Hello and welcome to Business Reporter's The Future of Banking and FinTech campaign. Accessing global payments and other financial infrastructure is fundamental to the continued existence, let alone growth, of small businesses. Yet it's surprisingly difficult. Millions of SMEs around the world have trouble opening corporate bank accounts, obtaining credit cards, and accessing cross-border payment systems. They're forced to spend already limited time, resources and money on something that should be easily accessible to all. And it has major consequences for this vital segment within the global economy. The same cannot be said for large corporations. They are keyed into the payments infrastructure required to make the processing of moving money around the world fast and inexpensive. So why is this not the case for small businesses? And is there something that can be done to break with the inequality in access to that infrastructure? To discuss these questions, we're talking to Riccardo Capilvinieri from Currenxie. Good morning, Riccardo.
Good morning.
Now, small businesses across the globe forever struggle with payments-based actions, such as money transfers, opening corporate bank accounts, and obtaining credit cards, things that large corporations have little trouble with. Can you give me some detail of the problems that they're facing?
I think we've seen a pronounced trend in the last couple of decades where banks have veered away from serving SMEs. They have taken a position on that where I think the economics for them aren't generally justified. So that means that SMEs are finding it increasingly difficult to be able to open up bank accounts, which means it inhibits their business, certainly if they're conducting a cross-border business. Even if you can open a bank account, if you want some ancillary services, such as getting a credit card, that can also be tricky or difficult because those are the sort of services that they'll probably have to wait for because banks will want them to establish some sort of transactional history before they give those to them. So those are some of the major issues that we've seen. And then in addition to that is just the cost of making cross-border payments, be it the foreign currency component or the actual remittance of a payment from one jurisdiction to another one.
Okay, let's take SMEs operating in Asia as an example. Explain how the landscape for business operations there inhibits the growth of small enterprises.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at where companies have tended to gravitate towards with regards to open bank accounts, they tend to open accounts or try and open accounts in Hong Kong and Singapore. But as I said earlier, the time it takes quite often is also an issue. So it can take up to 6 months or so before a bank account can be opened. And that's very frustrating for companies. We see this every day with inquiries coming through to our firm. They can have a business, pretty much all parts of many of the components of their business up and running. They've got suppliers, they've got buyers, they've got an e-commerce site ready to go, but they can't actually facilitate the actual payments. So that's a major issue for them.
What are the consequences of this inequality in access to payments infrastructure?
Well, it effectively inhibits their business, right? So they're trying to launch a business in a particular jurisdiction, and they can't facilitate that, or the cost of actually conducting business is relatively punitive.
How in particular does this affect new businesses with cross-border features?
Swift payments, which is the way payments are generally conducted, certainly from banks, have a couple of issues. One issue is they're relatively expensive. So for example, a payment from one country to another could cost up to, I'm just talking about the payment here, could cost say up to $50 US. Someone needs to bear that cost. It's either the sender or the receiver. So that's one issue, and that can accumulate, certainly if you're making smaller payments. So that's very, very punitive. The second issue is time. Those type of payments can take up to 2-3 business days, so that overall is frustrating for companies.
And what have you done to address this problem?
Currenxie provides a modern global business account, which gives them access to effectively our payment capabilities. We've integrated with many, many different banks around the world, and we provide our clients with access to unique bank account numbers in many different countries, access to making payments in a very cost efficient and fast manner. So for example, we can make payments from one jurisdiction, one country to another country in literally minutes, even sub 1 minute, where it's actually been received by the receiver in that short period of time. And that's a very powerful offering. In terms of the cost, it's relatively cheap. Payments can cost a few US dollars compared to $50 US. They're done, as I said, very, very quickly. If they want access to a business card, they can receive, apply and be issued a virtual card instantly, which they can already start using to pay for things online. If they want a physical card, that takes a little bit longer because we have to mail it to them, but that will be potentially received by them in, let's say, 1 week or however long it takes to be sent to them via mail. So overall, it's a very, very powerful platform. They can apply for it online without having to come in person to one of Currenxie's offices around the world, generally approved within a couple of business days. So in summary, it's cost effective, it's fast, it's got a lot of different features, and it takes care of one of the major pain points that SMEs find in conducting business.
There are many other companies operating in this space, aren't there? I mean, surely the challenges have already been met.
Yeah, I mean, there are probably a handful of companies that operate in our space. And when I say a handful, I mean have similar type capabilities. They're not the same, but they're similar. If you're just operating in Europe to European clientele and just operating within the confines of Europe, that's relatively simple. There are quite a few companies doing that. But if you look at companies such as ourselves, payment companies such as ourselves, that are conducting business on a global basis, there are relatively few. If you take a look at the banks around the world, I mean, obviously there are thousands and thousands of banks operating in a similar market. So the numbers are, payment companies are minuscule compared to the banking world. Also, I think no two payment companies are the same. They might operate in similar space, but it's not a commodity. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, so I don't think one provider can facilitate all of the demand that SMEs might have on a global basis. In terms of the entire payments market, it's a very, very large market. It's there are tens of trillions of dollars being sent around the world on a global basis, on an annual basis. So it's a very, very large market. Also, one last thing is in terms of the infrastructure. What we have, payment companies such as ourselves, we're not all the same, but certainly ourselves, all the underlying infrastructure it takes many, many years to actually build, be it from a technology perspective or a regulatory perspective. So there are still barriers to entry for new entrants to compete with companies such as ourselves. But overall, we welcome competition. I think it's good for the business. I think it's good for the industry, and I think it validates the size of the problem.
What could equal access to financial services infrastructure do for SMEs and the consumers that depend on them?
I think the first thing that we're going to see is entrepreneurs have the ability to start a global business much more easier, in an easier fashion. So there are a few hurdles for them to overcome. It's not the only one, but it definitely eliminates one of their issues. They can open an account with companies such as ourselves. and take care of most of their payment issues, within a couple of days. I think the other thing is you're going to see a trend of more products being offered to those SMEs via companies such as ourselves. And then in terms of the consumer, I think they're going to get a wider array of products being able to that they can access to, and also given to them at much more affordable pricing.
Well, it's a really important subject, so it's been great to find out more. Riccardo Capilvaneri from Currenxie, thank you very much indeed.